The session recordings for HoldCoConf 2022 are brought to you by Axial. Axial is a lower middle market deal sourcing platform. To learn more and to start accessing new deal flow today, head to axial.net.
Without further ado, Mike DEPAUW from Culture Index.
Thank you, Kelsey, and thanks everyone for being here. A couple of things real quick. If you took the time to complete the Culture Index survey prior to the session, your results are printed out and they're up here unless your name is Emily Holden, in which case I have your surveys. I saw it come through this morning, but I didn't have a chance to print it, so I will send it to you right after. If you didn't do a survey, there's folders up here in case you want to take notes or anything like that, so you're welcome to take those. People who, it looks like 4 people still have surveys up here who haven't picked them up yet. So give everybody a minute or two and then we'll dive in. You guys like super excited. Couldn't even sleep last night because I was so excited to talk about data. And the other thing is, if any of you did not already complete the survey and you would like to, you can do the survey. It takes about 5-7 minutes or so, and I'll send the results to you for free. The link is, so one, I think that Kelsey emailed a link out. 2, if you don't see that link, shoot me a text, that's my cell phone, or email me, and I'll send you the URL right after this. So that way you can complete it. Also, if you want to have people on your team complete the survey as well, there's no charge for that either, just to sort of see who you've got on the bus, things like that. But at a macro level, so Culture Index, strategic advisory firm that works exclusively with visionary entrepreneurs, CEOs, business leaders, and management to scale and transform organizations using applied analytical traits. What that really means is we use human analytics as a leading indicator of P&L success. When I talk about leading indicator of P&L success, that's really what it's about. It's about driving the top and the bottom line, and how can you take the guesswork out of the people side of the business. We're not here to read tarot cards or horoscopes or anything like that. It's about how can you use real data to make more informed people decisions. Make sure that you're getting the right people on the bus. Make sure that you're putting them in the right seats. Make sure that you're promoting and firing and developing the right people the right way. So, I just put a Billy Beane quote up here because I'm a big fan of Billy Beane and the whole concept of Moneyball right there. The idea that you trust your eyes more on stats, don't buy it because you've seen magicians pull rabbits out of hats and you know that they're not there. Perfect example, my background, just so you know, it's not HR, applied psychology, anything like that. It's actually accounting. Started my career, I have my degree from Ohio State. I'm a CPA, started my career actually at Deloitte. But who would have thought that somebody who is hard-headed, stubborn, doesn't like being told what to do, is not detail-oriented, and terrible at repetitive tasks would not be a good accountant. So anyways, they ran me out of town pretty quickly there. But the fact is, on paper or in an interview, I could convince most people, based on my pedigree, based on my resume, based on my experience, that I would be a home run of a candidate for that type of position, and arguably I would be the worst nightmare of a fit in that role. So again, the idea is let's trust the data, trust statistics. So when we're talking about this, do any of you, let's see here, know Mike Cottrell? Only one person knows Mike. Okay, let's see here. Maybe we'll go somebody that everybody knows a little bit more. This is Kelsey right here. So when we talk about this, what we're measuring here is we're measuring someone's natural tendencies and preferences, how they're hardwired, how they think, how they make decisions. And we're not just talking about are you high or low in the trait. What's really relevant here is how much of these traits do you have, or does the person that you're evaluating for a position have compared to the rest of people on planet Earth. That's all that we're doing on the people side of the business is we're comparing candidates, we're comparing people within the organization for certain roles to predict success. So by looking at 7 data points that we're collecting here, we're able to say, hey, this is going to be somebody who is more strategic, more big picture, more macro, more competitive, more hard-headed, more stubborn, more arrogant than 98% of human beings on planet Earth. This is somebody who's going to be selectively social at best, where essentially he will turn on the charm, be persuasive, motivating, and encouraging when it helps him accomplish his goals and his objectives. And then it's leave me alone, let me focus on data and information. He's also going to be more impatient than about 91% of human beings on planet Earth. Quick, fast, intense, driving, high-strung, more of a limited attention span, bored easier than 91% of people on the planet. And he's selectively detail-oriented. So he's going to be somebody where, sure, if he cares about those relevant details, if they help him accomplish his goals and objectives, he'll be almost forensic with how detailed he can get into the weeds. But if it's some sort of administrative task, if it's just organization, documentation, reporting, yeah, that stuff's going to fall through the cracks every single day. He thinks with his head, not with his heart. Doesn't mean that he doesn't have a heart. He's just not wearing it on his sleeves, using it to dictate the decisions that he's making. He's constantly going to be looking for ways to make the wheel bigger, better, faster, stronger, more efficient, more effective. How successful do you think this person would be in an accounts payable clerk type of position? Yeah, but what if his resume says that he has a lot of experience doing it? What if he tells you that he can do it? Exactly. Typically, it's okay. We're going to hire them. The reality is, what we're measuring here is 2 main components. We are measuring traits and behaviors. What I just described about Kelsey right there, those are his traits. If you took the survey results, that's what the top graph that you're going to see represents. Your survey traits. Now, your survey traits, these are your natural tendencies, your preferences. This is who you are. Now, most experts in the field of clinical psychology believe that this stuff is hardwired and established by the age of 6 to 12 years old. They believe that at that point in time, you are who you are, and you're not going to actually change, all right? So that top graph, these are consistent characteristics about you. This is who the person is and who you're going to see after the 90-day honeymoon period when you make a new hire. All right, have we ever had that experience where somebody knocks the interview out of the park and then 60 days later we're saying, hey, where the hell is the person that we just interviewed? This is somebody who's completely different. The survey traits tells you who that person's going to be after the honeymoon period. We can all modify our behaviors though, and that's what the bottom graph represents, job behaviors. This is more of a snapshot in time, and this represents how someone thinks they need to behave in their current role in order to be successful. So if we can actually measure someone's natural state, their natural tendencies, and we can measure how they think they need to behave in their current role, we actually have the ability to tangibly measure employee stress, employee engagement, employee utilization. So you can predict flight risks before they leave the organization. You can identify morale or engagement issues or burnout before they actually rear their ugly head. So that's what the 2 graphs are right there that we're actually measuring, is the traits and the behaviors. Are there any questions on that? Yes, sir. That's a great question. So Michael's question is, no, my eyes aren't that good. I was just making sure that it was the person that I thought it was. Michael's question was, have you ever run into a situation where for a certain role, the organization thought certain traits were relevant, but in reality, they're not? The short answer is yes. And part of what we do on the front end to mitigate the chance of having an individual's bias come into play of what's required for a particular position, what we actually do is we have a position benchmarking questionnaire that before you even start hiring for any position, we actually have you fill out that questionnaire and identify what types of traits, tendencies, and characteristics are required for the ideal candidate in this position. Now, the reality is Michael might have very clear understanding of what he thinks the ideal outside sales representative looks like. Does he have the perfect opinion? Maybe, maybe not. You know, if I ask Kelsey about it, Kelsey might have very different opinions about it. If I ask Keith about it, Keith might have very different opinions about it. So the idea is before we actually start going through the process of evaluating anyone for any position in the organization, the first thing you need to do, whether it's with Culture Index or any sort of human analytical trait assessment, the first step you need to do is benchmark the position. All right? So if you go through and say that it's an outside salesperson, you have the head of sales complete a benchmark for the position, you don't need to know what these traits actually represent yet, and say that's what they think the ideal candidate looks like. You have a current salesperson fill out the benchmark based on what they think the ideal candidate looks like for that position. And then say you have the owner of the company fill out the job based on what they think the ideal candidate looks like. Does it look like we're shooting at the same target here? No, you don't have to understand what the dots actually represent. You can clearly see we're on a different page here. So the idea is if we hire any of these three people, what are the chances that that person is the right fit? Minimal. So what we do is we actually work with you then to calibrate these C jobs to identify what assumptions are being made or are not being made about the role that are causing this disconnect to make sure that we all get on the same page and are shooting at the same target before we start going out and recruiting people based on the traits that we're looking for. Does that answer your question? Perfect. Yeah, thank you. Any other? Oh yeah, maybe I was supposed to wait till the end to do questions. I don't like that style. So if you got questions, let me know. Self-awareness is a big part of the program, and I have a tendency to oversimplify, undercommunicate, talk really fast, and not provide enough detail. So when I do any of those things, raise your hand and let me know, because it's not your fault. It's definitely my fault from a communication standpoint. So anyways, when we're talking about human analytics for P&L performance though, a lot of times we understand how important culture is within the organization, but we never actually put a dollar amount to it. So I just gave you a little back of the napkin math for, we talk about cost of turnover, but sort of like culture, it's a buzzword. What does it really mean? What is the hit on the P&L when you make a bad hire, when you've got a round peg in a square hole? So in this example right here, I just did a $50,000 a year salesperson, okay? Say hunter, outside sales, base pay plus commission. All right, when we actually go through and start itemizing some of the costs associated with recruiting this person, yeah, you've got the job ads, usually run around $1,000, give or take. You've got preliminary interviews, final interviews, which I would encourage you to actually evaluate your interview process and calculate how much time is each person involved in this process spending evaluating candidates. The expression time is money, I mean, that's a real thing. If you're curious how much your time is worth or anybody in the process, take your salary or the person's salary and divide it by 2080. That's the number of work hours in a standard 40-hour work week throughout the entire year. But anyways, estimating, you know, for the preliminary screens, the interviews, about $1,000. Final interviews, you're running around $3,000 because you've typically got the C-suite involved at that point, the higher up management positions. Typically, it's several candidates as well. Background checks, drug screens, yeah, a few $100 each, you know, maybe around $500 to $750. And then if you use a headhunter, one, I would encourage all of you, if you engage with headhunters, make sure that they sign a non-solicitation before you actually engage them to work with your organization. Because if you don't, there's nothing that's going to stop them from keeping a good relationship with the person they place at your company and then saying 3 months later, hey, John Doe, how's it going? Oh, it's going well. Who are some of the best people that you're working with? It sounds like an awesome organization. And guess who they're going after recruiting? So there you go. There's a free tip. Make sure if you're using headhunters, you have them sign non-solicitation. But typically they charge anywhere from 20 to 30%. I use 25% right here, so $12,500. So you're talking about recruiting costs there for a $50,000 position, running around $20,000. We talk about the training costs. If you're doing formalized training programs, giving them training materials, sending them to classroom training, typically that's running around $1,000 to $2,000 or so. This is the big one though right here, the on-the-job training. All right. How long is it taking them to learn how to be successful in this role? Not only how long is their ramp-up time, but how much time is that sucking from all of your managers who are trying to train these people? Not to mention, who do our managers tend to spend more time trying to bring up to speed? Is it the B+ players to make them A players, or do we spend more time with the D players trying to drag them up to an acceptable level? I mean, it's with those D players. Meanwhile, we're neglecting the A players or the B+ players. They're the ones that leave the organization, and then you're stuck with the dog you know what. So anyways, about $10,000 with regards to the training component there. Then you go to the purely administrative piece, the $50,000 a year base salary plus benefits. Typically, they run around 28% or so, which would be $14,000. So that's 64 grand right there out of pocket. And then we talk about the opportunity cost here. Now, there's two main components to opportunity cost because they're real dollar amounts, okay? One piece of it is, okay, the opportunity cost of the time that you're wasting on the wrong person and the time you're wasting not having the right person. But also, if you look at the opportunity cost, take a look at your top performing salesperson and what numbers they're building, and then take a look at your lowest performing salesperson and what they're bringing in. The difference of that is also going to be contributing to the opportunity cost. So you can see, the reason that I draw this out is because a lot of times, again, cost of turnover, it's one of these buzz terms. We never actually look at how does this hit the P&L. And you're looking for a $50,000 position right there, that can cost you upwards of 6 figures just for a $50,000 a year person, okay? Now I know you might not keep them a full year, so maybe it's not the full $50,000, but it's an illustration. So anyways, if you take that and then you look at your actual rate of turnover within the organization, the big question starts to become, how much as an organization are we losing by hiring or by tolerating the wrong people on the bus? All right? Questions on that? I did that in advance because I knew that the chicken scratch would be horrible if I didn't do it in advance. But any questions there? Okay. Perfect. All right, so the 7 traits that we're measuring here, the A, B, C, D, E, U, L, and I. So first trait, autonomy. It's a measure of independence, need to control one's own behavior and activity. All right, the way that we measure this stuff, if you see this beautiful bell curve right here, everything we measure is based on a normative sliding scale 6 sigma bell curve. So if you look at the survey results that you have, you're going to see that there's a red arrow. The red arrow, if you place a bell curve on top of the graph, the red arrow would represent the center of that bell curve, or the 50th percentile. All right, so then dots or data points that fall to the right-hand side are considered to be higher or above average. Data points that fall to the left-hand side are considered to be lower or below average. To be clear, below average doesn't mean bad, okay? It just means that trait is more absent. It's not as obvious. Now, the further away from the red arrow the traits are falling, the more obvious, the more extreme, the more pronounced they're going to be, the more predictable, the more consistent, but also the less flexible, the less adaptable. Traits that fall closer to the red arrow are going to be more malleable, more flexible, easier for the person to modify, but because they're so close to the 50th percentile, they're going to inherently be less consistent and less predictable. All right, so there's benefits and challenges with both. So if we look at the bottom right there, oh, is there? Great question. So, yeah, absolutely. So if you take a look at any of the survey results you have, you're going to see that the red arrow is actually not in the same spot every single time. It actually bounces around, and that's by design. So our program, it actually has a degree of validity and test-retest reliability in the low to mid 90s compared to things like DISC, Myers-Briggs, StrengthsFinder, which tend to run upper 60s, low 70s. Now, the way that we increase the validity by 20 to 25% is we actually constructed the assessment in a different format. So as opposed to using an ipsative format or a forced choice response like DISC or Myers-Briggs, where they give you a prompt, they say, hey, what describes you, A, B, C, or D? Well, what if none of them describe you? What do you still have to do? You still have to pick something. So I force you to choose something you don't identify with, which inherently skews the results, makes it less accurate and valid. That being said, if they give you 10 questions, how many answers are you getting? 10. So they're getting the same amount of data from everyone. For ours being a normative free choice response questionnaire, everyone's free to choose as many or as few words as they'd like. In case you haven't taken the assessment yet, it's a word bank of 174 words, and it says select all the words that describe you. It doesn't say select 10, 20, 30, or 40. So you're free to choose as many or as few as you would like. Now, because people aren't forced to choose a certain number of words, the results tend to be a higher degree of validity and test-retest reliability. Now, because everyone's selecting a different number of words, everyone's giving us different amounts of data. So the shorthand is the red arrow correlates with the number of words the person chose that were also scored. I emphasize that were also scored because there are safeguards in the system to prevent people from trying to game the system, manipulate the results in certain ways. But anyways, the red arrow is going to bounce around because the data is normalized for each person based on the number of words they chose that were also scored. Yes, sir. Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. So one, there are components of things that we don't measure. One, we don't measure self-awareness, and that can be a big piece of it. Two, we don't measure anything clinical because one, that's illegal, and two, it gets super messy. Now, to your question though, the way that you avoid people who have the overinflated opinions of themselves, there's actually safeguards built into the system where, say somebody goes through and have 174 words, they select 150 words to describe themselves. It's going to flag that no human being can have that much personality involved in themselves or they would explode. So it will actually flag avoidant responses based on some of those criteria. The other piece of it, or based on criteria that they've gotten the algorithm. Now the other, algorithms, it's not one. But anyways, the other piece of it is also out of the words that are there in the assessment, not all the words are scored, and out of the words that are scored, they actually all carry different weightings based on how much risk is associated with the assessment. So for example, if someone's trying to manipulate their results, one of the traits we measure is autonomy, independence. So the word independent describes someone who's highly autonomous. The word domineering also describes someone who's highly autonomous. So say somebody's not actually highly autonomous, but they kind of want to come off as being autonomous. Which word do you think they're more likely to pick? Independent or domineering? Independent. As a result, that word probably isn't even scored, and if it is scored, it carries very little weight. Whereas if somebody like Kelsey selects the word domineering, guess what? You know that person has that trait because people who don't will never go near that word. So does that answer? Yeah. Perfect. Great question. So anyways, going through here, you can see as we talk about these traits, you're going to notice that they fall on this scale of 0 to 10. To be clear, we do not actually care what the raw score of any traits are. We just care where do they fall in relation to the red arrow. So for example, you can see this example up here, the red dot, the A trait is on an 8. That is not an 8 out of 10. What it is, what we care about, is that it's 4 1/2 units to the right of that red arrow. Now, I'll put this in context for you. Every 2 numbers you move to the right or to the left is the equivalent of 1 standard deviation. So when somebody's A trait is 4 1/2 units to the right, that's just over 2 standard deviations to the right-hand side, which means if you look at the bell curve, that means that person is in the 98.5 percentile for that trait. So that person has more of that trait than 98.5% of human beings walking on the face of the planet. All right? So when you look down at the C trait, that blue dot there, the fact it's on a 1, that's irrelevant. It's not a 1 out of 10. What we care about is that it's 2 1/2 units to the left-hand side. So just under 1 standard deviation to the left-hand side. Is this tracking? All right, I don't believe you guys, so I'm going to do an example up here. All right, this will be fun because statistics is fun, right? I bet that's what you want on day 2 of a conference networking with people, is for me to quiz you on statistics. All right, so I'm going to draw 2 profiles right here. Now, to be clear, I'm sorry for my illustrations. It probably won't be to scale, but can we agree that these two profiles are the same? Thank you. Yes, I'm not trying to trick you right there. Not a trick question. Yes, they should be the same right there, okay? So let's say that this person right here, the red arrow falls on a 2, the A trait falls on a 4, the B trait falls on a 3, the C trait falls on a 0, and the D trait falls on a 1. This person, the norm falls on 8, A trait falls on a 10, B trait falls on a 9, C trait falls on a 6, D trait falls on a 7. All right? Who has more of the A trait? Heard a couple of people shot. Do you have a? Yep. So they'll be the same. Well, wait, I thought that this person's A trait's on a 10. That seems really high, right? Well, we don't care about the raw score. We care how far away from the red arrow is that trait. Well, the norm is on an 8. The distance from 8 to 10 is 2. The norm is a 2. Difference from the norm to the 4 is 2. Both of them 2 units to the right. Both of them 1 standard deviation above average. So both of these people are in the 84th percentile for this particular trait. Yes, sir. No. That's a great question, and that is some great feedback for Gary and Cecilia Wallstrom, the founders of Culture Index. I completely agree. A lot of people have also even questioned, why do you need the scale? The reason the scale's there is just to help you count how many units to the right or to the left, but I agree with your sentiment. Anyways, so as we're going through this right here, the A trait, if you take a look at your results or the results of anybody that you've got around you, the A trait stands for autonomy. It's a measure of independence, need to control one's own behavior and activity. So when you're talking about people who are high in this autonomy trait here, so in other words, when people have that red dot to the right-hand side of that red arrow, those individuals are going to be more independent. They're going to be more competitive. They're going to be more of those self-starters, self-motivated, self-directed, more decisive, more macro, more big picture, more future-oriented, more comfortable making decisions, all right? So when we're talking about roles that you want these high autonomy individuals in, do you think that these people can thrive in strategic planning types of positions? Yeah, absolutely. They're more macro in the way they think. They want to be spending their time thinking about the future rather than dwelling about the past. They're sitting in an airplane 40,000 feet up in the air and they're looking out of that airplane window. Let me ask you a question. From 40,000 feet, do you see trees and stop signs and houses from 40,000 feet? No. What do you see? Crop circles, shapes, colors. Exactly. So when you take a look at someone with a profile on the left-hand side and someone with a profile on the right-hand side, this person on the left, are they more big picture or more small picture? Big picture. Now, when people are more big picture in the way they think, they actually tend to be poor communicators. So all of you high A's in here, you're naturally poor communicators. I'm not saying you can't communicate with people. I'm saying, do people understand what you're talking about when you're communicating with them? And the answer is overwhelmingly a no. So when we talk about this and people have that A trait to the right-hand side, they have a tendency to oversimplify, undercommunicate, and not provide enough detail in the process. Think of it this way. You're in the airplane, the high A's, they see the mountain range, and they're saying, oh, hey, you know what? We need to go to that other side of the mountain range. Meanwhile, people who have the lower A trait and are more tactical, focused on implementation, execution, they're saying, okay, great. How the hell are we supposed to get there? There's a mountain in the way. Are we climbing it? Are we tunneling through it? Are we going around it? If we tunnel through, do we have the relevant machinery? How much oxygen do we need? Meanwhile, the high A is saying, I don't care how you do it, just figure it out, get to the other side of the mountain because I'm already 3 miles past the mountain, all right? Now this is Mr. John Wilson right here, one of your hosts, as well as his director of People Resources, Jen Cook, all right? Opposites attract, ladies and gentlemen, opposites attract. So the good news is, do you think these people can balance each other out? Yeah, absolutely they can. The challenge is going to be, do you think that John is always going to give Jen the clarity that she wants before she starts making decisions on something? No, absolutely not. So if you have a high A trait, take the time to land the plane a little. Provide a little clarity around where you're going, how you're planning to get there. All right? Now, lower A individuals are going to be more of the team players, more selfless, agreeable, peaceful, diplomatic, cooperative. They're going to play nice with others. Do you think that people who are high in autonomy always play nice with others? No, absolutely not, okay? They'll ruffle feathers just because they're bored, okay? Low autonomy individuals, more of the selfless team players. They're the implementers, executors, pushing across the finish line there. The B trait stands for social ability. Introversion, extroversion, high Bs tend to be a little bit more socially poised. They like working with and through people, more empathetic, more connective, okay? Lower Bs, not so much. They tend to be more focused on facts, data, information. They're more research persistent. All right, they're making decisions based on data and research versus going out and taking a public opinion poll. All right, now, can low Bs, are they always going to come off as being warm and fuzzy? No, sometimes they can come off as being cold, uncaring, emotionally detached, aloof, things like that. All right? The reality is, though, they're thinking, they're just not necessarily speaking. If they don't know how to do something, they're going to go do independent research versus calling a bunch of people. Now, if you've got a social ability trait that falls within +1 to the right or the left of the red arrow, you're not really an introvert or an extrovert. You're sort of an ambivert. You're kind of selectively social. In other words, you'll turn it on and you'll engage with a purpose, but you can sort of demonstrate the high and the low tendencies and very easily modify those behaviors accordingly. Make sense? Any of that not make sense? Yes, sir. Mm-hmm. Yes. That is a great question. So if we're seeing on the survey traits that somebody has traits that fall, let's see here. So this is, and don't be weirded out. It's not a photographic memory. It's technically called an eidentic memory. I remember images, but I can't remember names. What's your name, sir? James. Oh, well, I was gonna say. Yeah, there we go. So this is his social ability has fallen just a hair to the left-hand side. All right. So this is going to be somebody who by nature, yeah, more research persistent, a little bit, he's going to be selectively social. If he needs to build a relationship with someone, can he do it? Yeah, absolutely. But if he has to do an all-day networking event, guess what? Your head's going to hit the pillow pretty hard that night. So credit where credit is due over the last couple of days, my friend. Anyways, if you... Right. Yeah. Now that's an interesting case study right there. If we start, anyways, no, I'm not sure what's going on in your bottom graph, but hypothetically, let's just say that the social ability is falling over to the right-hand side, okay? Basically what that's saying is naturally, this is somebody who prefers working with data, working with things over people, unless he trusts the people and they provide value to him. But in his job, he feels as though he needs to be more friendly, more collaborative, more communicative. Maybe he's doing some persuading and influencing. Maybe he's having to motivate and encourage other people, build them up a little. Maybe you're trying to build relationships for a new acquisition. Maybe you're managing a group of people and you need to build them up. But regardless, when you see the trait bounce to the other side in from the traits to the job behaviors, that means you feel like you need to modify your natural tendency. Does that make sense? Perfect. Thank you. And then James, I believe in, this is what yours looks like, correct? Yeah. Okay, gotcha. For survey traits, yeah. The job behaviors, what's going on in job behaviors? All over the place. All over, fair enough.
So red lines at 6.5, red dots at 9, yellows at 4, blues at 8, grays at 6.
9, 4.
9, 4, 8, 6.
8, 6, like that?
Yeah,
Okay, gotcha. Cool. Sounds good. All right, so we see this person here is making some behavior modifications as well. Do you mind if I snag your survey real quick? Cool. This will be easier, even though you can't see it, it'll hold me seeing it. So, we've got someone here naturally where his gift is his self-sufficiency. All right, this is going to be one of the most self-sufficient human beings on planet Earth because he both has the ability to initiate things, but he also has the ability to push things across the finish line. This is going to be somebody who operates with a sense of urgency and drives things forward. Naturally, in the job behaviors graph, you'll notice the autonomy is moving even further to the right-hand side. So it looks like you're in strategic planning mode. Maybe you're doing some forecasting. Maybe you're doing some macro-level problem solving. Maybe you're looking into the future at different opportunities rather than being in the business every single day. It looks like you're focusing on working on the business rather than being in the business every single day. Does that? Yeah. That makes sense. That's actually going to be your biggest blessing and your biggest curse is the fact that it's tough to get the hand out of the cookie jar because in the mind of you, you're going to say, why can't people see what I see? Why are they talking so much? Why are they moving so slow? And they're going to screw it up anyways. I'm just going to do it myself. Does that sound about right? Okay, fair enough. So yeah, so that's what we see with the behavior modifications right there. Now, here we go. I'll give this back now that I crumpled it up for you.
Thank you.
There you go, perfect. Now, if you go back and we go through the rest of the traits right here, the C trait stands for pace or patience. So when the C trait's to the right-hand side, more patient. Now, to be clear, this just means the way that the person thinks, makes decisions is going to be in a more systematic and methodical fashion, all right? They like focusing on one task at a time, really drilling down into the problem or the task at hand before moving on to the next thing. Whereas when the C trait's to the left-hand side, these are serial multitaskers or task switchers. So they're operating with a sense of urgency. They're going to get distracted by a shiny paperclip. They're going to be moving at 1,000,000 miles per hour, hair on fire at all times, all right? They like variety and change. So if you're putting a low C into a highly repetitive, predictable environment, they would rather shower with a bear than do that job every day, all right? So make sure you're giving them variety, giving them change every single day. The D trait stands for conformity. Think of this as being your attention to detail. So when the D trait's to the right-hand side, these are going to be people who are more detailed, accurate, precise, thorough. They're going to demonstrate strong follow-up and follow-through. They're the finishers, focused on quality. How important do you think that would be to have somebody with a high D trait in a compliance type of position? What about accounting? Yeah, absolutely, all right? Now, when you have people who have the low D trait, look, it's not saying nonconformists are running around breaking all the rules, but they're going to be a little more selective with the rules, all right? You know, all the high Ds where there's a right way and a wrong way to do things, they're crazy. The world's not black and white, it's different shades of gray. Low Ds live and thrive in that gray. They don't want to be boxed in. They don't need or want a lot of structure. They're more focused on results and outcomes as opposed to how specifically we get somewhere. Now, I'm going to skip the EU for a second and go to the L and the I. The L stands for logic. It's a measure of emotional control, okay? So this is based on where do you fall on the scale of 0 to 10. 0 is low, 10 is high. You know, so a 7 is a 7 out of 10. So if we're talking about the L trait being up near an 8, 9, or a 10, these are people who are making decisions based on logic and objectivity versus emotional impulse. They think with their heads, not with their hearts. It's not saying they don't have a heart, they're just not wearing it on their sleeves, using it to dictate the decisions they're making, okay? Versus when you have an L that's in the range of 0, 1, or 2, these are people who are going to be more emotional, more sensitive, more heartfelt, more expressive, all right? They're going to be more prone to wearing their emotions and their feelings on their sleeves, all right? And then the range of 3 to 7, that's the normative range. So basically a way you could think of it in the range of 3 to 7 is their emotions are visible, but they're not controlled by those emotions, all right? Their initial reaction to a situation might be more emotionally charged, but usually they're going to be pretty quick to be like, okay, hey, my bad, that was an emotional reaction. Let me dial it back, come up with something a little bit more logical, a little bit more objective. Make sense? All right. Now the EU, the last trait we're measuring here, EU stands for mental stamina. When we talk about mental stamina, good way to interpret this is we are who we are and we cannot change who we are, but can we all modify our behaviors? Yeah, absolutely, right? So the EU is telling us if we need to modify our behaviors, how long can we maintain those modified behaviors before we start to feel mentally exhausted or drained? Now, this is a raw score based on a scale roughly of 10 to 90. The higher the number, the longer the person can maintain modified behaviors. The lower the number, they can still make the behavior modifications, but they're going to need to take more frequent breaks throughout the day to recharge that mental battery pack. Questions on that? All right. Now we talked about Kelsey right here. So let's do an example. So if we're talking about a tactical accountant right here, all right? This is the C job, the ideal candidate right here, okay? Lower A. So is this going to be somebody that's more of a team player or more independent? Yeah, more of a team player. They'll take direction well, more focused on implementing, executing. The B trait, the social ability, a little bit to the left-hand side. So more data-oriented, focused on facts, information. Makes sense for an accountant, right? The C trait over to the right-hand side. So someone more patient, systematic, methodical, comfortable with repetition, predictability, and routine. They're going to be consistent. They're going to be even. And then the D trait right there. The D trait on the right-hand side. Highly attentive to detail. They're going to follow the rules. If they tell you they're going to do something, it's going to get done the right way. Makes sense? How close of a fit do you think that a person on the right is? Yeah, it's literally the opposite of what you're looking for. So that is every day of my life, the first 2 years in my career, because that's my profile, out-of-body experience every single day. So anyways, the point is when we talk about this, people can maintain, people can modify their behaviors, but the reality is, if you're having to demonstrate an out-of-body experience every single day, how happy are you going to be doing what you're doing? You talk about culture right here. When we're talking about fit, we're not just talking about fit with a position, but we're talking about culture as well. The reality is the culture is the sum of all the people that you have in the organization. If you've got a bunch of people who are miserable coming to work every day because they have to have an out-of-body experience, what do you think that culture is going to be like within your organization? Exactly. It's going to be awful. And again, culture directly ties to the P&L, all right? This is all about how can we drive the growth in the P&L, okay? Top line, bottom line, build some sustainable scale. Questions on this stuff so far? Yes, sir. Great question. So his question was, does the norm change depending on the culture or where you're at in the world? And the short answer is yes, it will. Our norm is more reflective of the North American population. You know, if, for example, you go to a highly authoritarian, autocratic country like China, for example, what tends to happen to highly autonomous, free-thinking individuals? Yeah, they go away. So from an early age, that trait is suppressed beyond belief. In Germany, for example, you heard about the whole excellence in engineering and everything. From an early age, the Germans emphasize the D trait, the conformity, the precision, the accuracy, doing things the right way the first time through. So as a result, the German population tends to skew higher on the conformity trait. So to answer your question, it does depend on which, what the culture is overall in the region. Ours is more reflective of the United States, or excuse me, of the North American population. Great question. That makes a big influence. To be clear, it also does not actually show any sort of skewing between generations, okay? So it tends to be 50-50 regardless of which generation it is, whether it's Gen Z, millennials, Gen X, baby boomers. Yes, sir.
So the line is based off like the population, like you draw the line on country, like
Well, it's just more reflective. So when they were actually calibrating the data and they did the validity studies, they did it based on North American population. So when they did the validity studies, they weren't doing it with countries in Europe. Yeah, great question. Other questions? Yes, sir.
So you have the ideal candidate. To determine the ideal candidate, is that based on what I would think the ideal candidate would be, or are you guys using like a database of other people that are looking for an accountant all meshed together to find out what the best fit for that ideal candidate would be?
Great question. So he was asking, when we're coming up with the benchmark for the ideal candidate, is it based on what they say the ideal candidate looks like, or based on our database repository of the ideal candidate across the board? The answer is yes. So when I say that, there's two main components to it. One, we're not doing a one-size-fits-all because, you know, if you're looking for the ideal candidate at a car wash versus a public accounting firm and say it's a staff accountant in both positions, you know, it's going to probably look vastly different. So what we do is we actually have each organization complete position benchmarks for each role in their organization. Now, as we're filling out the benchmarks for the organization, we're not just taking into account one person's opinion. Typically, for any role that we're doing benchmarks for, we're having the hiring manager complete the C job. We're having, if there's currently people doing the job and they're successful, we're having them complete the C job. If the hiring manager supervisor has an intimate understanding of the position, they're doing the C job as well. Then, you know, whether it's myself or some other advisor, I work with about 80 organizations or so, and you know, we've seen a lot of these positions and we've seen what tends to be successful. So I have the ability to go into our database as well to see, hey, this is what you're coming up with. Is this relatively in line with what we tend to see across the board in similar industries? So it's a combination of both, but the emphasis is on your organization's needs. Does that answer your question?
Yes.
Perfect. Thank you. Yes? Great question. So there's two components to this. So one, validity is, are you measuring what you say you're measuring? That's basically how accurate is the instrument. The stability refers to the test retest reliability. Our test retest reliability coefficient is 0.94. So 94% validity, or excuse me, test retest reliability. So we don't see any material changes in the person's survey traits over time. Great. Yes, sir. Yes. And I think that I actually, I forgot a slide. Hey, guess where my attention to detail is? Yeah. So basically how we actually roll this out, first of all, it's all about the P&L. So the first thing that we do is we get an understanding of, okay, based on your current P&L, where are you at? Where's your top line? What's your bottom line? What's your turnover look like? And then secondly, most importantly, where do you want to take your business in the next 1, 3, 5, 10 years? What we do then is we actually survey everyone within your organization across the board, from the C-suite all the way down to laborers. And the reason we do that is because we want to see, who do you have on the bus right now? Who's in the right seat? Who's in the wrong seat? Who are the high potential employees within the organization? Things like that. Then we look at, okay, based on your current team, guess what? I'll tell you right now, it's the case for all of you across the board in here. Your team right now is perfectly designed to do exactly what you did last year, okay? So the question is it designed to take your organization where you want it to go? And if the answer for 3, when we're assessing the team right here, is no, then we can go through and we can start figuring out what types of people do we need to add to drive that type of growth. Now, to Michael's question about, hey, so how would we coach on, you know, working, you know, we have these two people that are working together. How do we make sure that they work together? What we do is we actually train you how to interpret this data in a matter of seconds. So you're not reading a 30-page friggin' narrative report that realistically most of you in here won't do, and then on top of it, you'll probably lose the narrative report. We train you on how to actually interpret these dots to immediately understand who they are and how they need to work together. Now, What I do is I actually continue to provide ongoing coaching consultation for you on this, and I'd be recommending, okay, if this is John and Jen, we're looking at where do these profiles work well together, where's a potential disconnect. For example, the A trait. Obviously, one's very high, one's very low, so that's gonna be an area of disconnect. So my advice would be, hey, John, when you're communicating with Jen, try to land the plane. Provide a little bit more direction and clarity specifically regarding the who, what, when, where, why, and how for what it is you're telling her to do, rather than throwing crap at the wall and saying, Jen, figure it out. I want to do this now. Jen, does that resonate? All right. Now, if I'm coaching Jen then on communicating with John, guess what? If you start providing him all the details, all the information, all the specifics, how long do you have his attention span? About 3.2 seconds. So my advice for somebody like Jen would be, hey, get to the point quickly. Start on the front end. Why are you reaching out? What do you need? Use 2 bullet points and then leave it open to John. If John needs additional information, he'll ask for it. So what we do then is we coach on where that disconnect is. So hey, say that you've got somebody where they're not perfect fit for the role, but they're close enough we can coach them. By understanding someone's natural tendencies, you can understand specifically how do you need to coach this person. Now, I know that we're out of time right here, so what I would say is, whoa, I didn't realize how big my face was gonna be on that. I apologize. I'll get rid of that for a second. Anyways, what I would say, look, the assessment's complimentary here, so if you haven't done the survey, I'd encourage you to do it. It takes 5 to 7 minutes. I can walk you through the results, what we measure. If you're interested, even getting a free diagnostic of your team, maybe your C-suite, your executive leadership team, just reach out to me, send me an email. That's my cell phone. You can call or text me as well. Just let me know. I can get you logins. You can survey your team for free. There's no charge for it, just so that you can get a better understanding of what we measure and how it works. It's a comprehensive program, so I sort of like sprayed you with a fire hose here. Yes? Sure, absolutely. Yeah, so what we do is we train the leadership team for the small businesses, the key decision makers, how to understand this stuff. Then we go in and we survey everybody within the organization, identify the high potential employees, create a development roadmap for them, and we start identifying then the low-hanging fruit of, hey, this is a square peg in a round hole, we need to backfill this position, and we come up with the ideal profile right there, and we actually work with you to create a specific recruiting strategy based on the type of person you're trying to find. Yeah.
Thank you, Mike.
Bye.